Good evening, everyone. I'm Marie Dorigny. I'm the Associate Director of the Institute for Ideas and Imagination. And it's a great pleasure and honor tonight to welcome Ahmed El Maanouni at the Institute. I'm just going to briefly thank Alessandra Ciucci, who's an ethnomusicologist at Columbia University and a current fellow at the Institute for Ideas and Imagination, for suggesting that we do this event and for organizing it with her characteristic diligence and enthusiasm. This is exactly the sort of event we love organizing here. I think it reflects very much how we bring together great artists with great minds for great events. So Alessandra, over to you.
Marie, thank you for being always so generous with your comments. And good evening, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here, and thank everyone for coming. Allow me to also thank the Institute for Ideas and Imagination for supporting this event that only a few months ago it was unimaginable, so now it's been imagined and it's in the making. Particularly Mark Mazauer, who we're very lucky to have here with us this evening, which is the director of the Institute, Marie Dorigny, you have met and as associate director, James Allen and Justine Bénédet. And also to thank the Columbia Global Center in Paris for co-sponsoring the event, and especially the director, Brune Biebuck. And needless to say, it's my great honor to be here with, in the company of Ahmed El Maanouni. I'm going to read a couple of things so that I don't forget what's important to say. Ahmed El Maanouni is a writer, director, cinematographer, and producer whose work includes some of the most emblematic titles of Moroccan cinema. The first Moroccan director to have caught international attention was his debut feature Alyam Alyam in 1978. A few years later, in 1981, with Trances, a film whose interweaving of concert footage, interviews, and archival footage captures the excitement and the relevance of the music of this legendary Moroccan group, Nass El Ghiwane. Trances, I must add, was also the first film selected by Martin Scorsese to be digitally restored and re-released as part of his World Cinema Project. Ahmed El Maanouni's career goes, however, beyond the two titles I just mentioned, so let me just also make you aware of some others. The Eyes of the Golfe, 1984, The Moroccan Goumiers, 1992, The Life and the Reign of Mohammed V, 1999, Morocco-France, A Common History, 2006, Burned Hearts, 2007, Conversations with Driss Chraibi, 2015, and more recently, Fadma, 2017, to name a few. And today's conversation is going to focus on Trances and the work which walks really a fine line between film and documentary. It's often said a film documentary, documentary film. As much as I would argue, perhaps you may not agree, and you will tell me, as Alyam Alyam does, or for that matter, all of your work, which is characterized by a close, perceptive, and realistic look at everyday life in Moroccan culture and society. However, I'm not a film critic. And although I have always enjoyed movies, my first encounter with the work of Ahmed Maanouni was because of music. And I quite remember, quite distinctly, and I don't know if I ever told you, that I bought the DVD of Trances at the Harmattan Rue des Écoles. I bought it there. And I bought it when I had no idea that I was going to write much later on about Nas El Ghiwane, the kind of serendipity, encounters you have. You buy something or you look for something before you even know what's going to happen later. At the same time, however, I must also add that I was very much studying and researching on a musical poetic tradition in central Morocco, which is, by the way, where Ahmed was born and raised. So that's just to say what things can happen, I guess, imagining once again. Now, as an ethnomusicologist, I come from a tradition in which we begin our talks with music. That is to say, with that which we will talk about afterwards. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with what we will be discussing today. And so I'm going to ask if we can actually show the very first excerpt of Alyam Alyam.
ويا من هو اللي صعطاد هود الغاز عمرني ما ريت الغزال تمشي بالمهماز فراخ الخيل عاد وسراحو عمرني ما ريت نخلة تعطي حب الغاز بعد التمر فوت بلاحو يا من هو ديب ويا من هو ديب في الغياب كتار سياح واليام اليام يا بنتي مالك يا عوجا واش من سباب عرجتيني بيه طارات سقيني حليب طارات سقيني حجاكي مولاهي ضيق حتى عيا وقالوا راها فيه تبقى فيه انا قاع بنادم نبغيه وضاع النوم تلي بغيني كيف نبغي نقول عليه اللي بخلاقي ما يخليني
Now that we have seen and also heard the first excerpt, I would like to ask you the following question. It's a moving beginning, and it's some of the power, I would say, it's for me located at the intersection of that desolation of environment of a central market in the region of the Moroccan plains and the Shawiya region in the Moroccan plains and so forth. And so you have this desolation, you have this empty space, and then you have this voice that anyone that is familiar with Nass El Ghiwane will immediately recognize as that of Al-Arabi Fadma, and a voice that is characterized by a certain roughness of a timbre that in Morocco we would say harsha. That's so harsha. Harsha, exactly. You know, so you have a certain roughness of it, which, however, is very much part of the aesthetics. So you have the song of Finradi Biakhuya, where you're taking me, brothers, that it's already very important for the lyrics. But also you have that vocal timbre and that voice that is really anchored in the region. And so I'm wondering how the choice was made, not just of the songs, but also that particular moment to enhance perhaps the desolate space so much more.
Masa al khair. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here and making the impossible possible. Talking about Alyam Alyam takes me back maybe before most of you were not born yet. I was preparing my first film, scouting in this region, the Shawiya region. I was back then in the 70s, mid-70s, the Europe, and especially France, seemed to discover the image of the immigrant. Suddenly, the immigrant was everywhere. Immigrants who were living in the suburbs of the cities, in the slums. Still, there were slums north of Paris. But suddenly, they became, you know, the talk of the day. Their image in every media. And I wanted to know the roots of immigration. And the roots were not to be found in Europe, of course. They were to be found back in Maghreb, in Morocco. So I took my still camera and I went to where the source of emigration, and the source were the farm workers. And I found I really was struck by the strength of a big desperation. And something which I was very, very important immediately I just pointed was that these young farm workers have lost hope in their natural horizon. They placed hope everywhere, somewhere else, in Europe, for instance. And I was listening to Nas El Ghiwane, and this harsh voice of L'Arbi Batma was so rooted in the soil, the very soil these workers were digging, that it seemed to me like a premonition. This song, which is Fin Radi Biakhuya, Where Are You Taking Me, Brother, is an emblematic song of Nas El Ghiwane. We're going to talk later about Nas El Ghiwane. And it gave the title Alyam Alyam to my first film. So I decided that the song and the film be linked this way. Thus started my relationship with L'Arbi Batma and Nas El Ghiwane. I even started to work on a musical comedy. Hi, Isa. I'm going to introduce Isa Jedini to you. She is the producer of Trances. And I wanted to show that this relationship between the song and the farm workers was really organic. That's why this Fin Radi Biakhuya became let's say, became the film, and the film became Alyam Alyam. It put a very lasting imprint on the film critics, on the cinema goers, and on me, because then my relationship with Nas El Ghiwane started, and thanks to Isa, later she asked me, because she was tired of waiting for a project I had of doing a musical comedy. Actually, on the example of the theater of Tayyip Siddiqui, the plays of Tayyip Siddiqui was doing with them, but it was very hard to put on as a project. So Isa one day asked me, I need to have this concert of Nas El Ghiwane being recorded. Can you do it? And of course I was going to say yes, but immediately I just, why not make something more ambitious, something more personal, something which really gives what is Nas El Ghiwane? She said immediately yes, but she didn't know where she was going, what I was going to lead her. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, what we call in Morocco the lead years, Sanawat al-Rasas, les années de plomb, there was a lot of political upheaval in Morocco and repression. And paradoxically, a strong movement, artistic movement, just was born, from theater to music to painting, les beaux-arts, to cinema. And among these movements, one trade union called the Union Marocaine du Travail, UMT, sponsored a young theater director, Tayyip Siddiqui, for a theater called Le Théâtre des Travailleurs, Workers' Theater. And this Tayyip Siddiqui founded, he was going to found the modern Arab theater, actually. Later, after that, he took on the venerable Théâtre Municipal of Casablanca and founded Masrah al-Nas, the theater of people. And there, he had this bright idea to build a company and to call young singers or actors or would-be actors from the poor areas around Casablanca, and especially from Hay Mohammadi. And there in this nursery of his, this lab, were those who were gonna be the stars of the next 2 decades. You had Boujma Hougour, who is, I'm gonna talk about him later, Al-Arabi Batma, Omar Syed, Hamid Zoughi, Snoussi, Tahiri, etc. And they actually, there in this laboratory, affinities worked, or alchemy worked. And immediately this Nas El Ghiwane took off to become the phenomenon of Arab music. Martin Scorsese calls them the Rolling Stones of Arab world, to the point. And that's how, from one song, we came to Alyam Alyam, we came to trances.
And maybe to have a full understanding of the excitement that Ahmed El Maanouni was describing, can we see the excerpt too? And it might be helpful here to remember, and you may have noticed, this is during the years of Aled, in which, as Ahmed has described, a moment in which there was repression, people disappearing, tortures, and so forth. And you may have noticed the quite strong presence of police or people that will make sure that things will not go all the way into. So there's that's what's, I think it's quite amazing to see this kind of excitement and the way you capture the excitement. This is one of the scenes that caught me from the very beginning. So my question is if you could perhaps talk a bit more on the importance of the excitement, the importance of the audience here in reference to the music or your film.
Immediately, you know, when I got to know the Nass El Ghiwane members of the band, L'Arbi Fadma, Omar Sid, Allali Allah, Abdurrahman Paka, I was struck by how simple they are. They are the kids from Hay Mohammadi, but as soon as they were on stage, my God, there was a transfiguration, sans jeu de mots. They became, you know, and this phenomenon was also something palpable that I saw, that I felt every bit of it, and all the youth from Casablanca to Baghdad, they had this same relationship and the same reaction to this music and to this their words. We're going to talk later about the words. The political situation was, as I told you, during a very sensitive time in Morocco, and each concert was very, very much guarded with security. In the very beginning, they had some concerts which were not authorized at all. Then they became too big, as I told you. They transgressed the borders, so the regime couldn't, you know, stop them that easily. But they were not persona grata, actually. Later on, they become still. They had this sulfur, smell about them, but they were invited in the palace of the king, and they were asked to sing Subhanallah, Sifna wala shtua, things like what's going on, the summer is becoming winter, and the next line was, and the dictators, etc., etc., and they started, you know, I imagine them shaking and shivering, and Omar Sid with his bandir, and he says, Subhanallah, Sifna wala shtua, and they didn't mention the dictator. And the king was there, and I said, stop. He called Omar Sid, he came and said, there was some line about dictator, no? He said, go ahead, sing it. And they sang this in front of King Hassan II. That's what Omar Sid recalls. Omar Sid is you know him. He's such a character. He's able to ruin any serious discussion. It's impossible to have a serious discussion with him. But he has this wonderful admiration for the talent of each other of the members of the group. He really was like a little boy when he was listening to Al-Arbi, bringing something so old, much older than his age, and with these words, and these words were immediately resonate because they were chiseled hundreds of years before, and they meant something, and they had this effect on us. And it was a question mark. Where did L'Arabi Batma bring this from? But L'Arabi Batma, he suckled it from his mother's bosom, as the milk. It came as a transmission, as a continuation. And he also was a very good pupil of Tayyib Saddiqi, who based his theater on the sources, on the popular and the heritage, and going to the oral culture. Sufi poets like Sidi Abdurrahman Majdoub, or just plain popular culture. This admiration they had for each one of them was something which really impressed me. And I got to know each one of them. L'Arabi Batma, and I had an immediate relationship with him, complicity. He has an imagination so full, a world in himself, so full of obsessions, of imagery, and it had to be present in the film. Abdurrahman Paka, who is the most mystical musician of all of them. He's a performer, but also a mu'allim in a zawiya of Gnawa, religious confrérie, but he acts as a mu'allim in this confrérie, as a leader of this confrérie. Allal Ya'la is a very discreet person, but he is the guardian of the orthodoxy of music, of the Moroccan beat. Any beat which has been played at the top of the Atlas or at the far Sahara desert, he knows it. He is really an encyclopedia, but discreet. He doesn't talk much, and it took me a long time to have a connection with him. We were at the Club Méditerranée, if you remember, for preparation of the concert. And at the Club Méditerranée, you use beans to buy extra drinks or food, etc. You have string of beans. And I spotted one day Allal with the barman, and Allal seemed very embarrassed. He had some guests, and the barman must have asked him for beans, and he didn't have all the beans the barman asked for. So I just came to rescue, and I had so many beans, strings. So I took all my beans, I gave them to. And from that day, Allal was much more talkative with me. And he even confided one evening, he talked to me about his childhood and how hard it was with a very strict father. And thus I understood more how he became a teacher, how for him it was very, very much important to transmit to young people. So all these, this quick portrait I give you now for each member was actually the core of the film. I wanted to go from one character, one personage of Nass El Ghiwane to another, to have this relationship I had with them, and that it would come as true as possible. I tell them my way, which is maybe the oral way of, the circular Jama' al-Fna storytellers, rather circular, but at the end, to bring you the most authentic portrait of each member of these simple kids from Hay Mohammadi, but huge artists.
Bien sûr, avec un plaisir.
I would like just to remember or to remind something regarding this crowd and this atmosphere between the musicians and the crowd. In fact, it was in a stadium, and Nass El Ghiwane was supposed to be in the middle of the stadium, and the people and the public on sur les gradins. But there was such a rush that they rushed from the seats to there, and then it was impossible then to take them back to the stadium. And that what gave this close and electric atmosphere.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and thank you for that. And perhaps what might also help to clarify some of the point that Ahmed was making is not only the importance of getting these four characters and their investment in music and investment in arts and so forth, but also in the importance of bringing forth Moroccan. I'm going to use the term popular because actually in Arabic it's quite more complex to actually define it. But it's oral and it's vernacular, and that was the anchor of their creativity and how they worked on and so forth. And I think the next clip may actually show you the attempt indeed to do a direct line from, let's call it tradition, into something that we can say modernized, or in something in which tradition needs to be reworked in the 20th century, and particularly every time that Hay Mohammadi is mentioned, it's Casablanca and it's the neighborhood. So we are actually talking very much about the urban Morocco until now, anyway.
الشيخ سيدنا بلال الله يخير الحرب يسقينا منه الله يجعل بركته تكون معنا تكون مع الجميع فتح الزهر والمرزق يجعل غرض يقضي عشرة فتح الله يقضي الغرض الله يجمع الجمال الله يتوي الخوا يتحل المعلم ديالنا الله يدير له البركه الله يحفظه هنا كل سنه الله يجمع الجمال ان شاء الله وجوه خالدين ومصبور راغبين ومرغبون واقفين بباب الله سيادنا ان شاء الله زاهرين نصروا قدامهم ساروا لله اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد اللهم صل وسلم وسلام.
يا العربي يا العربي أخويا العربي يا العربي يا العربي يا العربي أخويا العربي يا العربي
So here in this excerpt that we just saw, you try to make, or you make this direct connection, and maybe indirect connection between what would say is tradition into the way in which the song is then reworked and played in a different setting. Can you maybe add something more? And well, here's what you're doing.
This is really interesting what Nass El Ghiwane achieved. Bringing something which is really identified as religious confrérie. How do you say confrérie? Brotherhoods, yeah. Religious brotherhoods with the trance being a therapeutical or religious or mystical manifestation, etc., where the body vibrates with the soul, etc. And to young audience who has no relation with religiosity, who are profane, but the same mechanical reaction happens. Their audience react exactly the same as the participants in a brotherhood. Succeeding in doing this link is something quite extraordinary in my point of view. More than that, the words themselves, the words in a brotherhood ceremony are, let's say, the address to the Almighty for our human difficulties and asking for the help of God. To the young audience of Nass el Ghiwane, it becomes a rebellion. It becomes, they read it a double entendre, another thing. And it was very, very clever because they would not be, let's say, censored for the words, because the words were used in any, at the corner of Casablanca or in Sawira, like this, going on. It's the same thing, but read, it has the same flame of, let's say, of living in the religiosity and in the profane. And this is also extraordinary. Thanks to their talents and thanks to the Tayyib Saddiqi, they have this, let's say, this demanding work of really digging deep in the roots, in the Moroccan, as you say, vernacular, oral, the music which is just carried by the wind from one village to another, but the music is there, and they caught it, and they brought it. It's a work of a museum, but it's really very original from my point of view. This, and I wanted it to be present in the film to show that this is the work they have done. They are not just performers on stage and to make the audience enjoy. They bring a whole. You'll hear at the end Scorsese talking about it. They bring the culture of a country. They bring the soul of what makes us what we are.
I think that may also help for everyone, perhaps, to understand. I think of it very much as an archive. And as an archive in which there's a repository of music, words, and feelings. In that sense is very much what you're saying. But also, I think what also you said earlier on, they were a tassel or an element in this vibrant culture, visual arts, poetry, cinema, and everything else. And so there was this despite what was happening in the everyday disappearances, tortures, and censorship and so forth, but you have this very strong artistic moment that came out. And so you see this going back to the vernacular, going back to the oral. We see it in magazine from Souffle to Amalif and so forth. So
Yeah.
right?
And they grew with their own image. They didn't just remain, you know, those kids from the from Hay Mohammadi neighborhood, discovered by Tayyip Siddiqui, and then going on stage and having success. They followed and they grew. I remember one afternoon, I was at Bziz's house apartment in Passage Sumika in Casablanca. Yeah.
It's a very famous comedian.
And there was Larbi Batma and a huge Moroccan author, Mohamed Choukri. He wrote Le Pain Nu.
For bread alone, in English translated.
And this guy who didn't go to the high school, Larbi Batma, he was having a literary conversation with this author, and it was fireworks. It means that he educated himself by himself, but he was like a sponge. He took from all these great people he worked with or he was with, and he became himself a chiseler of words. He became an author. He died much too young. Otherwise, he would have been a great Moroccan author. Yeah.
I think we've talked a lot about Tayyip Siddiqui, and we have yet to see anything by him. And so if we can have the fourth example so that we can actually enlarge the discussion to theater, which is fundamental here.
وقال في قصيدة الخلخال يا من هو في الهجرة فريد تايه باكي شاكي هميم مجروح بحالي وقت ما شاف الزين ورقته تصفر وتذبان حضر بالك ليا وكون عايش وصغان عايش
لك تقال شي مع بوجماعة مسكين عقلتي فاش دخلت انا المره الاولى فاش دخلت المسرح لقيتي لي انت وبوجماعة جايبين هذاك المدير
عرفتي يا سيدي 67
الله يرحم بوجماعة مسكين كان جاو كيصبر عليا كيقول لك اودي صبار ولا ديال المسرح باقي صغير لسه صغير من يا الله يرحم
تيجي معك واحد المندير عقلت عليك وجهي وخازن وقتها بحال صالح المكي
كانت الوالده كمدات لي البندير بواحد الشرويطه وهذاك الشيء غادي وهذاك البندير بعدا عرفتي تا هو بحال داك الجلد اللي قلتي ماشي كاع ديال الماعز ديال الغنمي
لا ديال الغنمي هذاك ديال الحولي
ديال الحولي
عندك الحق دغيا كيبرد
ويلي ماشي دغيا كيبرد ونسيت انا بلا المصحه كانت في هذيك الساعه تقريبا واحد 30 بندير ولا شحال
ناس الغيوان. هما في الحقيقه في نظري انا ما هماش مغنيين بالمفهوم الكلاسيكي وبالمفهوم العام، بل ممثلين كيغنيو. يعني شبه ما يسمى قديما عند الفرنسيين لي تروبادور، او حتى عندنا حنايا كنشوفوا بانه كاين في بعض المناطق مثلا في الاطلس كنشوفوا بعض الشعراء 4 ديال الشعراء او 3 ديال الشعراء كيتمشاو من سوق لسوق ومن دار لدار ومن حي لحي ومن كيغنيو مسائل كتهم الناس لا سياسيا ولا اقتصاديا ولا يعني مسائل خاصة بالناس.
خبز السرغيل
You yourself were very much interested in theater, and that's where you had your beginning. So perhaps you want to say more about the importance of theater for you personally and also in...
You're right. Theater was and still is a passion for me. I was struck by it during my high school years. I discovered through Comédie Française used to make tour in Morocco, and they came to Casablanca. So I just with my class, we went to see Georges Dandin, which is a comedy, and I was, so impressed by that, and we were invited to meet the actors, and I might have said that I really wanted to be an actor, and I was invited to follow the evening courses at the Conservatoire Municipal de Théâtre of Casablanca. The evening courses, I had to have an authorization from my uncle who raised me. I lost my parents very early, and I told him they were giving us free mathematic lessons support. So I had like this one night I was on stage reciting some Don Juan monologue, and I saw the door at the back of the room open, and my uncle appeared, like the statue of the commander, and he came up directly to me, took me by the ear, and he said to the professor, "This is dance, this is not mathematics." That was the end of theater. I resumed theater in my university years later on. My regret is that I never met Boujma. He died in 1974, and he was, the concentré of talent, actor, singer, writer. He was a militant in a way, and with a charisma so big that even his death became, carried so many legends about it. Some said that he was put in some jail somewhere in the mountain, and that he's still alive, etc. But the sad truth that he had lung cancer and he died of it. I always use theater in my films as much as possible, and I had the chance that these singers, these musicians, were also actors. So it was very easy for me to set up scenes and like Commedia dell'arte Lazzi's and using Omar Syed propensity of making jokes and also self derision to make serious things more obvious without speaking seriously about things, but show them in that way, and especially in a comical treatment is very something I like, and I always use it. Even in my last film, I use it as a mean of being. Life is as difficult as it is. So let's not be serious when we speak, especially about art.
but also it's embedded in halka, in what you said at the beginning, you know, this form of popular theater in which it's a circle and different entertainers will move through, and in which music is fundamental, but also comedy and the regions and everything else that is going on. It's entertainment at the best in many ways. So perhaps that's also part of your thinking of that you know that you need to have something that is at the same time serious, but
yeah, it's something which is live. It's you still go as a tourist to Jamal Fna Square, and you see the Globe Theatre there. You see the experimental off Broadway there. You see Avignon there. Everything is happening there, and we need that. A human being needs this reenactment for just being able to bear this life, and I had this mutual affinity with Nas El Ghiwane, with the members of Nas El Ghiwane, that we could have done more actually.
And the natural affinity, I think it might be kind of evident in this last, on the fifth example anyway, that I'm going to ask to play, in which for the first time they kind of speak to you directly, the man behind the camera.
لا لا بحال دابا انت كدير مخرج ديال السينما الا حيدناك دابا ودرناك حيدنا لك الاخراج من ما ديرش اش غادي دير اش غادي بشكل دير غادي تلقى ما تخدم تلقى الواحد كاع يمشي كاع كيف كان واحد الوقت كاع الاخوان كلهم كان في الاول كان خدام شي عفه انا كنت خدام في الحوت خدمت في القصب وما خدمت في الليمون ولكن ماشي هي هذيك ماشي هذيك اللي كيقلب على الانسان واش يبغي غادي ناخذ نيت انا السي احمد المعنوني وغادي ندير واحد البلاصه يخدم فيها غنقول لا سيدي انت ما غاديش تبقى دير اخراج السينما غتمشي للوزين ديال الكورفات تخدم الكورفات ونبزز عليه ونحط عليه ما عارف جنوي ولا فردي ولا شي حاجه نقول له والو غير تخدم هذه ولا شي حاجه غادي يقدر يديرها لانه خوف.
And in this last excerpt of the film, maybe I can ask you. I see a lot of containment here and a lot of challenges. The people being contained to make sure they don't spill out and the exaltation doesn't exceed the expectations. There's also this double use of words, words that mask what's actually the meaning may be, which is commonly done in vernacular poetry and so forth. And then also at the very beginning, you have Nass El Ghiwane having this discussion with you, the man behind the camera. And there's also this challenge, which is not clear if it's going to be used because of economics, because of censorship and so forth. So there's all this challenge that is there in the film. If you may want to talk about just the challenge of perhaps making the movie.
Well, this was shot in 1980, but still it was very, very sensitive to speak out clearly, or to just say a cat is a cat, as we say in French, my point was to speak about the difficulty of censorship, about repression, and what is the effect of censorship and repression on your practice, on your work. But they and I never wanted to put my words in their mouths, but they kind of made a contour around the subject and say, I can do any other job, and they took me as an example. If I stop you from making your films, and I thought it was very clever in a way, not being just very first degree, saying or being a victim, and I like that about them. They never were a victim. In the concert you see here, the authorities, they were really on their maximum alert, because they were scared of the audience, that it might turn into a demonstration. And that evening, Larbi Batma said, after the concert, you come with us. And I say, where? And he said, we are going to the General Glimi, who then was a big head of repression. And I said, oh, no, I have to prepare tomorrow's work. I want to go with. But it's a contrast in a way, and in order to survive, you have to use this double entendre, and what's wonderful is that the audience knew exactly what was going on and what was meant, and they reacted to it, and that's what we wanted to show. What's the magical thing about the filming reality is that an image can become a metaphor. You have Nass El Ghiwane singing, and then the words, they come from religious brotherhood, Gnawa, a big story, a history of slavery, etc. And it's my heart is pounded by the ironsmith, and if it's cold, he adds more iron, and it's pounded. And they are singing that to young people who are not Gnawa, and they respond to that because they feel that their liberty, their freedom, their horizon is blocked by this repression. And on the background, on the audience, you have the police, you know, beating some audience, and it's just the star of, you know, the guardian star of the documentary filmmaking.
Should we open the room for discussions for people that might want to ask questions?
And before the Scorsese thing?
Oh, you would like to show that first? Okay, so
Yeah,
we can
maybe
show that first, and then
yeah,
we can open up. Yes, can we see the last excerpt, please?
Back in 1981, when I was editing The King of Comedy, I had television on, and on this cable station, happened to see a picture that was shown several times during that week called Transis, or El Hal. The title seemed really appropriate to me because I was mesmerized by it. Transis is a poetic documentary by Ahmed El Maanouni about an extraordinary band called Nass El Ghiwane. Now, like many Western bands in the late 60s and the early 70s, and I'm thinking of the Stones and the Incredible String Band and Fairport Convention, among many others, Nas El Ghiwane went back to their roots. They were looking for a connection to their audience and also to their culture and their history. They came together at a time when Morocco was still in the early stages of independence, and I suppose you could say that the band was literally trying to sing and be the soul of their country. They went to old forms of music and poetry, and they used traditional instruments, only traditional instruments, which is quite remarkable because when I listen to it and the sound they produced, there are times when I swear I'm hearing electric instruments. Larbi Batma, Boujima Hargor, Omar Asayed, Alal Yala, Moulay Abdelaziz Tahiri, and Malem Abderrahman Baka, who joined the band in 1974 after Hagor died of lung cancer. Now, these were the members of Nas El Ghiwane, and together they created a form of trance music that was both hypnotic and, for their very devoted listeners, deeply inspiring. So I became passionate about the film and the music, and when we formed the World Cinema Project in 2007, it was then called the World Cinema Foundation, Transis was the first picture we restored with the help of our partners at the Cineteca di Bologna. And I know it was a good beginning.
So if there are any questions?
He restored the trances, and my first film also, Alyam Alyam, I'm waiting for him to restore me. Don't be shy.
Would you perhaps?
And French is also a valuable language, by the way.
Okay, English is also okay, thank you. Would you perhaps want to tell us more about the rayonnement, the influence Nass El Ghiwane had in, not only in the Arab world, but also in the West, wherever immigrants from Morocco and North Africa were living?
Well, even in Morocco, they had an immediate, let's say, effect because they were maybe 10 musical bands on their trace, followed their trace. المشاهب تجدع, they Izenzagen in Berber, in Amazigh language, and in the Arab world, they also were the example of a new expression also of something that the young audiences needed that at that time. They were there at the right time. They toured a lot in Europe, in the immigration communities, They had a great, let's say, impact because they brought something really authentic. It is show business, but it is something also an authentic culture. This, it's funny that you said the word harash is harsh. Harsh and harash are the same, actually. It is the harsh life that has constituted this expression, this musical, this oral poets, and it's immediately it has an effect, and of course multiplied when there is exile, because it's we are more in need of authenticity.
Can I just add, Alessandra, can you expand on that a bit, because I know you worked I mean, it's an interesting question.
Indeed, as everything that Ahmed says, there were different strains of influence, we can say. One indeed was in Europe among the migrant communities. And whereas in migrant communities, why actually you may find that people will go to different concerts or different performances according to where you're coming from. Or you will listen and buying music in accordance to the force of Nass el Ghiwane was indeed to create this mixture that it was authentically, if we can use that term, which I'm not fond of, but I'm going to use it, Moroccan. And at the same time, it was difficult to decide what was Moroccan about it. They had a way in which they were able to use a rhythm from Daita to the words of Ganawa and so forth. And in fact, those who were not too happy about them coming, they often would say it's fauda. In Arabic, it's a mess. It's almost you cannot make it. It's confusion. So the fact that they were able to bring all of this, it made it possible for different groups and different regional communities coming together. What is also important to remember is that, indeed, as Ahmed also said, there are quite important influence throughout the Arab world, particularly after 1967, the defeat of Egypt and the Six-Day Wars against Israel. And there was also particularly important in Tunisia, in the Maghreb, it was huge. So that all of their political, let's say, music had, Nass el Ghiwane had a strong impact. Of course, Nass el Ghiwane also were taken from similar movements that used similar expression, or they were experimenting with folklore and so forth. Last thing is that cassettes and 45s were tremendously important. So you had a nascent recording industry. And so many of the recordings that they did were already, they were being distributed and even published in France, and then later on in Belgium and so forth. So that kind of transnational discourse was already happening. If anything, it already began to happen with Tayyip Siddiqui. Tayyip Siddiqui that we saw, it already had those voices, those songs and so forth. So that was already circulating. It is not, in many ways, it's a local experiment that went very well, but it was already transnational in its circulation up from the very beginning, theater and so forth, if that helps.
Yes, the concerts in Europe, their concerts in Europe, they were as big as the concerts you see in the film in Morocco. The audience was enthusiastic, and I remember one of their concerts in Aulnay, in the suburb of Paris. I remember it because it's there that I met my wife.
I wanted to ask you about amplification and also cassettes, because very similar things are happening in the bit of the Mediterranean that I know about, Greece and maybe elsewhere. In the same time, in the 70s, it's this time of the power of a certain kind of anti-establishment music. And very different traditions, but the political valence is the same. Anti-authoritarian, incredibly popular. And I think of two things that I connect somehow in my mind with that time. One is you would go around the streets and there would be carts selling cassettes, cheap cassettes. And they usually had a small loudspeaker and they would be blaring the music. So what did this mean? This meant in the sort of battle for the domination of the streets, the sound domination of the street, this music was suddenly dominant. And so the sound, the noise, the loudness of it, and so they're using the traditional instruments, but they're amplified. They have these loudspeakers. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that. Would they have had the same effect without the loudspeakers, without the tape cassettes that you could buy and sell, without, everything seemed to me to come together at a certain moment.
I know that they were not seen or heard in the official channels, radio, television. They were heard in the streets. They took the streets by just, it's the clever thing to do. And it immediately caught, and you have this loud thing. And this is I hate usually loud things, but this loud expression is something which is healthy for young people to express themselves, to express their need of freedom, that they just can't stand it anymore to be repressed, etc. That loudness is great.
But I would say that also, I don't know if you agree, the loudness is also part of Moroccan weddings. So when we go there, there is also it's the microphone, right? And so here you have singers. I'm speaking, and I know that some people here knows about shekhat. They would have this voice which is strong, and it's trained in a certain way. The moment that you have the microphone, and they will not talk this way, and they would begin to sing. So there's almost an affect of distortion as well, which is really, this is not clean music, right? The idea of the harsh, shiaja harsha, it's not just that it's grainy, it's not smooth, it's everything that is not. So, and that, I think...
Yeah, it's the soil. It's it's really the soil. It's soil, the nourishing soil, the killing soil of hard labor. It appears in the expression, in the voice, in the words, and in the use also. We need that, and in order to be alive, or in order to say, "Hey, I am here."
And I think perhaps as a concluding thought, it is exactly where you started. You started with that voice. You started with the silence. You started with the earth. So that was already completely there.
You're right. So right.
Thank you.
Thank you.